Hey y'all, so in today's video, I'm sharing 3 misconceptions about nonprofits. Let's get into it. Hey there, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. So if you need help with starting a nonprofit or raising startup money for your nonprofit, this is the channel for you. I've been waiting for you. So make sure you subscribe to this channel because I drop videos every week. And I have at this point, over 200 videos to help you through your startup process. If you want to take your nonprofit full time, then you should be checking into my videos to help you along that journey. And as always, if you need help starting a nonprofit, make sure you check out my nonprofit startup workbook, which guides you through 10 different worksheets to help you launch in your first year. So I wanted to do this video today to share the real side of starting a nonprofit. I try to be very encouraging and very positive, but also very real about what it takes to start a nonprofit. And in this video, y'all, it's going to get a little real because I don't ever want you to get into a situation where you didn't realize it was going to be this difficult. And I try to make sure you understand exactly what you are stepping into when you make that decision that it's time to start a nonprofit. It feels good when you first fill out that paperwork and you're like, oh, I'm official. You got your little certificate from the state, all that kind of stuff. But it's the other side that we really need to be honest about. And that's what I want to share in today's video. So let's get to the first misconception. And the first one is that starting a nonprofit is a personal wealth strategy. There are some people on YouTube who talk about starting a nonprofit who use the angle of as a way to like either shield your personal wealth or to make money a certain way. And I don't particularly like to use that angle because I don't want people to be mistaken that somehow starting a nonprofit, it can be like a cash cow for them personally. Because the reality is a nonprofit organization is an independent corporation. It is not tied to your individual finances. You are supposed to be separate, right? And as a nonprofit founder, you're not an owner or a shareholder. You're not entitled to any benefits just because you started the organization. You're not entitled to any profits that the organization may make. So when people say like it's a way for them to make a whole lot of money, I often get confused because I'm like, that ain't the way. There are other strategies you can use to make money. I think sometimes people go into this thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to start the organization. It's going to start, making money and I'm just going to get my check. I'll let other people run it. And I want you to, pump your brakes if that's what you're thinking, because that's not exactly what this is. The way you make money through a nonprofit that you start is by collecting a salary or being compensated for the work that you do. And you typically get compensated when you're working in a staff person's, capacity, or when you're working like as an independent contractor doing a project for the organization. That's how you get compensated. You don't necessarily get compensated just because you're sitting on the board and you had a great year. Or, hey, let's just give a check to the founder because we had a great year. You're not entitled to that as a nonprofit. And you have to remember that a nonprofit is a public organization if you're creating a public charity. So it's not something privately owned by you. No one can own a nonprofit. So if you're thinking it's a way for you to be able to earn money really quickly, then I want you to think twice about that. And some of you guys are like, I want to create my nonprofit so I can quit my job and just, do my dream. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that's an admirable goal for a lot of people. And there are some people who start their nonprofits and they work for their nonprofits for years and actually retire from their nonprofits. But if you automatically think like that's how it is going to go, that's not it. You don't even appoint yourself as the leader of your organization. Your board appoints you as the lead. Your board sets your salary. Right? So you're still operating in the position of an employee. So if you're looking at it like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, this is my thing, I can make decisions. That's not what this is. That's why I said it's not like a personal wealth strategy where you feel like you can start it and it can just bring money in for you like you were starting an LLC or something like that. Okay? Now, there are ways like you can use nonprofits for your personal finance strategy, right? So maybe you make some money, and in order to not be taxed with that money, you donate it to a nonprofit, or you put it in a fund, or put it in with your foundation or something like that. Like, yes, that's how you can use nonprofits as a part of your wealth strategy. But I'm saying running a nonprofit is not necessarily a personal wealth strategy, because it's not something that you own. It's not something for you personally, right? It's a community wealth strategy. That's how I like to talk about it. It helps the community build, especially when you're creating these community-led, these smaller grassroots organizations. It's supposed to build the capacity of the community, right? Then it's a strategy in that way. But for yourself individually, it's not a personal wealth strategy. The second misconception I want to talk about is people thinking that having a nonprofit is the only way you can do some good in your community. Having a nonprofit is one strategy to address an issue or a need that's in your community, but it's not the only strategy. So I know you guys know a bunch of people in your community who are probably helping people every day. They help people on an individual basis, or maybe they're helping groups of people every single day, but they're not necessarily doing it as a business structure, as a nonprofit, or as anything. They're just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. You don't necessarily need a nonprofit to be able to help somebody. You create a nonprofit to have a business structure for certain protections, right? Around like liability, and to be able to access funding, right? And to be able to not be taxed for the money that you collect. There are absolutely reasons why you want to create a nonprofit, but I just wanted to be clear that a nonprofit is not the only strategy. There are groups who help people in their neighborhoods who are not organized as nonprofits. There are mutual aid groups who are not organized as a nonprofit or have 501c3 tax exempt status. There are informal groups that come together and they help people in their communities, whether it's their geographic community or it's just a community of people who have gathered for similar experiences, like that kind of community. Again, your people feel like the nonprofit may legitimize, and I just use quotes when I say legitimize, what you do, but you don't necessarily have to have that. There are just implications for whatever you decide to do. So if you decide not to have a business structure, or if you decide not to get 501c3 status, then that will have tax implications for you. Or people may not see you as credible, or people may see you as more credible. It just all depends. The other thing is, nonprofits do a lot of the direct work, but you can also do good by creating a fund or raising money to give to other nonprofits. You could still be facilitating good even though you're not doing the direct work. So having a public charity nonprofit is not the only way to do good, right? Now I'm getting a little bit too technical right now, but a private foundation is still considered a nonprofit. But a lot of people don't think about it that way. But again, a different type of nonprofit could be used to do some good. Here's the other thing. You can do good as a for-profit. You don't necessarily have to have a nonprofit structure to be able to do good or help somebody. You could have like a really noble mission where you're still trying to make profit, but you're helping somebody as you make profits. Maybe that will subsidize the work that you do for a lower cost or for free for different types of clients. Or maybe every time someone purchases something over here, then you're doing something good over here. That's a business model you may want to have as a for-profit. Again, you don't have to have a nonprofit to be able to do that, but every decision that you make has implications for the next decision. So here are two resources that I just want to call out for you. The first one is my nonprofit startup masterclass. So I have thrown around words like public charity and private foundation, and you may think you know what those mean, but they have very specific meanings when it comes to the IRS. So if you need help navigating that, right, those definitions, I highly recommend you take my nonprofit startup masterclass. I taught on this topic for over 2 hours. It does detail what you need to do to prepare yourself for the IRS process. So I recommend that you take that class. It's linked below. And number 2 is a workbook. It's called the Develop Your Nonprofit Idea Workbook. And this is for those people who are trying to decide whether or not they're going to have a nonprofit or a for-profit. When they're trying to create their idea, they're trying to flesh out the ideas in their head. It has a bunch of guided questions that guide you through that process. So if you need help and you're at that stage in your work, then I recommend you get that workbook, and I'm also linking it below. The third misconception is that you can start a nonprofit as a solopreneur. And when I say solopreneur, it's as a person who can do everything themselves. They don't need anybody else to launch. So I'm going to take my time with this one because I think this is the one that's the hardest for people to get and to accept. So this is how I know that people may be having a hard time with this. I'll hear things like, do I really need a board? Or, I mean, I have a board, but they don't do nothing. So I just do everything myself. And I don't have time to wait for them. Or it's like, I really just wanted to start this to do this specific thing. I don't need all of this extraness. I'm just trying to do this one thing. So those are the statements that I hear when I know that a person has a mindset that they're just trying to do this by themselves. But I want to be real about this and just say to you that if you want to get to a certain level with your nonprofit, there are certain levels you will not be able to get on your own. And this is really hard for people to accept. And I know sometimes when people hear me say this, they do get offended. But I'm just trying to be real, and I'm just trying to prepare you. You can only get so far on your talent, on your time, and on your capacity. It may get you a ways, but eventually you're going to hit a wall. Eventually you're going to be burnt out, and you're going to be frustrated, busted, and disgusted. And I'm not telling you this as a way to keep you from your dream. I'm telling this as a way to make sure you reach your dream, to make sure it happens. You have to invest in people and building a team around you to help you get where you need to go with your nonprofit. And there's only so much you can do all by yourself. And I understand that it's frustrating when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, right? Or you bring people to the table, you're trying to be patient, you take the time to get them there, and it takes forever to get them to move. But just like you invest time into starting your nonprofit, you invest money into starting your nonprofit, you invest time in developing your programs, you have to invest time into people. You have to invest time into building a strong team to help guide you through this process. And here's the thing. You may want to do this all by yourself, but that's not how having a public charity nonprofit was designed. If there's only one person making all the decisions for the nonprofit, where's the transparency? Where's the accountability? Where's the checks and balances? How are you managing conflicts of interest? And whether you want to accept it or not, you are a public organization and you are subject to rules from the IRS and rules from your state. And there's very little you can do around accountability when you're the only person who's making decisions, or you're the only person on the bank account. You're the only person spending money. You're the only person looking at the accounting and looking at the financial transactions. That actually puts you at risk. It really does put you at risk when you are the only person doing all of that and managing financial information. When funders look at your books, or they start to look closely and they see that you're running everything, it's a risky move for them because there aren't checks and balances around how money is spent and what happens with the money. I hope this makes sense. So if you're coming at this thinking, I can do this all by myself, I need to do this all by myself, I don't want anybody else, I really want you to pause and think about where that's coming from. And I want you to think about how you can change that thinking to engage people with you. And it may be that people are letting you down. It may be that people are not doing what they're supposed to do. But that is just a signal that it's time for you to invest more time into building, first of all, finding the right people and building a team with you. Right? And so there are some places you'll be able to go. Like you can hit some levels, right? And get to some milestones running the ship all by yourself. I'm not saying that that's not possible because I've seen it happen. I see it happen all the time. But what I'm saying is that you're going to hit a point where it's no longer joyful for you because you have to do everything yourself. It's going to be a burden. It's not going to be a joy. And you started this because you wanted to help somebody, and it made you, it filled you, right? I'm just going to guess for most of you guys, that's the reason why you started. But it's going to get to a point where you're going to be mad all the time. And look, I'm talking from personal experience. I'm only talking about from what I've seen for myself. You're going to be mad. You're going to be disgusted. You're going to be frustrated. And it's no longer going to be joyful. Now, here's the thing. Like, that's the nonprofit journey. There are going to be some things that piss you off and make you mad. But why not share the brunt of that and the burden of that with a team instead of wearing it all on your shoulders? So I just really, really invite you to think about this differently. If you're approaching this as if it's just me, I got it, I don't need anybody else. And I also want you to consider that if you are doing this with the team and you're still not joyful and frustrated and busted and disgusted, even when you have people helping you, to take some time and figure out how to invest more into your team, invest more into relationships to make it better and to make it more fulfilling. So y'all all right? I feel like I'm like Mrs. Rogers, like, just want to tell you. But again, I like to share the reality of starting a nonprofit, and I want you to be successful. And I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about the other side of this. It's really fun and it feels good to do your paperwork and have everything done. But there's still the other side of actually running this thing and actually getting it off the ground. And it's hard. So I just want to be real with you and make sure I help manage your expectations so you can reach your dream. Okay? If you need help with your nonprofit, visit me at bossonabudget.com. Also, if you need one-on-one help from me, I do consultations. So I will be dropping the information for my consultations down below as well. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.